Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we dig into some really fascinating source material to find those surprising insights. Today, we're plunging into a truly rich conversation. It's this intense, sometimes pretty funny exchange between two childhood friends, JJ and Charles.
Yeah, and we've got their letters. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Full of wit, sure, but also some seriously deep intellectual sparring.
Right. One's a seminarian just starting out, the other's at university, a self-proclaimed new atheist. And they really go at it, wrestling with, well, everything. God, science, morality, what reality even is. It feels very raw, very personal.
It really does. And what's compelling, I think, for this deep dive is that it's so much more than just, an intellectual point-scoring game. It's a human story, right?
Yeah.
Two people trying to figure out these huge worldview differences while somehow trying to keep this friendship they clearly value.
Exactly. So we'll be pulling out the core ideas, looking at their different angles, and hopefully connecting the dots for you on how we all kind of approach these big questions.
Our mission for you today, then, is really to experience this unique back and forth, understand the main arguments, maybe find a few aha moments for your own search for knowledge.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's dive straight into that first exchange. The core conflict, atheism, order, and the first cause. So Charles, he drops this bombshell on JJ, right? Tells him he's an atheist, but, his definition, it's maybe not quite what JJ was expecting.
Yeah, he clarifies pretty quickly. It's not about believing no God exists. For Charles, it's about having, quote, no reasons to believe that Heshite exists. He even makes that unicornian comparison.
Right, like show me the evidence first.
Exactly. Which naturally sets the stage for a huge clash. JJ, being a first-year seminarian, immediately challenges him.
How does he phrase it?
He basically asks, how can you, Charles, a rational being, with ordered thoughts, a complex body, how can that come from what JJ sees as just random chaos? He's poking at the source of order itself.
Okay, so that's the core tension right there. And Charles counters?
Oh, yeah. Charles pushes back hard, saying science isn't about random chaos. That's a mischaracterization, he thinks. He points to things like the Big Bang, abiogenesis, life from non-living chemical compounds and evolution.
All governed by laws, he'd say.
Precisely. Natural laws, physics, gravity, natural selection. He argues that order emerges from chance plus time. He even mentions things like the Doppler effect, RNA self-replication, stuff happening over billions of years.
So if Charles thinks natural processes are enough, where does JJ go next?
Well, JJ goes for the big philosophical question, the first cause. He argues, okay, if everything needs a cause, then God, being a person, not a thing, is the logical exception. Otherwise, JJ claims time itself just becomes eternal, becomes the ultimate source, effectively crowning time as the God of the universe. So he throws down that challenge. Who first set the clock?
That's a pretty direct philosophical question. How does Charles handle that?
Interestingly, he kind of sidesteps the direct philosophical debate there. Instead, he attacks the biblical timeline JJ might be implicitly relying on.
Like the Usher date.
Exactly. He brings up Bishop Ussher's 4004 BC date for creation and says, look, science just invalidates this. He mentions the Ice Age, these ancient coral reefs in Vermont, 450 million years old.
So he's using scientific evidence against a literal interpretation.
Right. And he even questions JJ's potential old Earth view, asking, well, how did plants survive before light was created on day 4, according to Genesis? Or how did light from stars billions of light years away reach Earth in just 6,000 years? He's highlighting what he sees as major inconsistencies.
Divine law or human construction.
Okay, so they've clashed on origins. It makes sense they then move to morality, right? Another huge area.
Absolutely. And the clash is just as sharp here. JJ lays out his case. Without God, concepts like good and evil just lose their objective meaning.
They become just natural.
That's his word. Merely natural. He argues morality needs a standard, which implies a lawgiver. He uses some really stark examples, like severe abuse, saying without that divine standard, these are just natural events, not inherently wrong.
Wow. And Charles's response? I imagine he disagrees strongly.
Completely. He flips it. He asserts that we, humanity, are the system. We are the lawgivers. And our ideas about morality, they're constantly changing, evolving over time.
So for Charles, morality is governed by natural laws too, like social evolution.
Kind of, yeah. He gives examples like societies eventually overthrowing tyrants or the negative natural consequences that might follow harmful actions. He sees these as almost self-correcting mechanisms within human society and nature.
JJ must have a counter to that. Does he refine the idea of biblical morality?
He does. He tries to clarify, distinguishing between different types of laws in the Old Testament. You know, the ceremonial laws, specific civil laws for ancient Israel, and then the moral laws, which he argues are universal, timeless.
Like the core ethical principles.
Exactly. He even suggests there's an ingrained moral law in everyone's conscience, pointing to Paul's letter to the Romans.
Okay, but Charles isn't buying the biblical framework at all, is he?
Not really. He takes aim directly at Christian morality, finding it, well, confusing. He points out that even Christians don't always agree on the Ten Commandments, for example.
And how they apply today.
Right. Or how American law, for instance, doesn't perfectly mirror them. You've got the First Amendment, people work on Sundays, you don't go to jail for coveting. He also makes that provocative point about God seeming to change his mind between the Old and New Testaments, even suggesting God's early years were evil.
It's quite a statement.
It is. And he connects this to modern societies. He brings up places like the Czech Republic, the Netherlands, Denmark, relatively secular, happy, low crime rates. He contrasts them with places potentially having singular rulers, implying a rejection of a divine dictator model leads to better outcomes.
So it circles back to that earlier tension. JJ brings up his seminary professor's idea.
Right, that atheism isn't primarily intellectual, but a morally volitional choice, choosing moral freedom over submission to God.
But Charles counters with statistics. Lower crime, divorce rates in secular countries.
Yeah, he throws out places like Japan and the Netherlands versus, say, the US or Saudi Arabia, based on the data he has. It really throws a wrench into simple assumptions about belief automatically equaling better societal morality, doesn't it?
It definitely complicates the picture. It raises that huge question about correlation versus causation.
Exactly. JJ's professor is making a kind of philosophical or theological claim about motivation. Charles is looking at societal outcomes. Proving a direct link either way is incredibly difficult given all the factors involved in a society's health. 3. The nature of truth. Reason, revelation, and the limits of knowledge.
Okay, so from origins and morality, the conversation naturally turns towards, well, how do we even know things? Epistemology.
Right, and their approaches are, again, fundamentally different. JJ champions revelation.
Meaning knowledge comes ultimately from God.
That's his stance. True knowledge, he argues, is revealed by God. Science is valuable, sure, but it has absolute limitations. And crucially, he believes science will never ultimately contradict true revelation. He even suggests our ability to reason itself is a gift from God, a revealed work.
And Charles, I assume he's on the side of empirical evidence.
Absolutely. He champions discovery through human effort. He points to Darwin, Goddard's rocket science examples of knowledge gained through observation and ingenuity. He also brings up the God of the gaps idea.
The idea that religion fills in what science hasn't explained yet.
Sort of, yeah. Or more that religion adjusts its interpretations as science advances. He mentions the Catholic Church using scientific panels sometimes to reinterpret biblical passages, maybe seeing them as poetry or parable instead of literal history as scientific understanding grows.
Charles also gets personal here, doesn't he? About his own journey.
He does. He shares that his shift away from belief started young, being told things like the global flood story that he felt he knew not to be true. Then later, events like 9/11 and learning about Judaism and Islam, apparently on Larry King Live of all places.
Oh, interesting.
Made him really question the whole one nation under God concept and solidified his need for tangible answers, evidence-based answers.
And JJ responds to this emphasis on scientific explanation with a baby.
Yeah, it's a moment of classic JJ humor, but with a sharp point. He throws out this baby challenge to natural selection. He asks, okay, if evolution is true, who fed the very first baby of a new transitional species, that hypothetical fish, monkey, cat, man baby, as he puts it?
The one that couldn't fend for itself yet.
Exactly. He says, until science can explain how that first helpless, maybe missing link creature survived, well, he's going to keep his keys to the kingdom.
It's a clever, maybe slightly cheeky way to point out what he sees as a practical gap in the evolutionary story.
Definitely. And they touch on suffering, too. JJ frames pain almost like a spiritual alarm system, a wake-up call, a 911 emergency, pointing us toward God for the real solution to our deeper problems.
But Charles counters that with examples of non-believers doing great things.
Right. He points to atheists like Julius Axelrod, inventor of acetaminophen, and looks at the Nobel Prize lists. He asks, well, why isn't God blessing more Christians, statistically speaking, with these kinds of world-changing talents?
He's questioning the practical link between faith and certain kinds of success or contribution.
Yeah, and he even critiques intelligent design using the example of animal eyes. He points out the huge range from simple photoreceptors in deep-sea creatures to complex human eyes, arguing this variation undermines the idea of irreducible complexity, the notion that some systems are too complex to have evolved step by step. JJ's thesis: a philosophical standpoint on life, needs, and victory. So all this back and forth, this intense debate, it actually culminates in JJ putting together this formal philosophical thesis. It's quite something. He lays out his whole view on the essence and nature of life.
Okay, what are the core components of his argument there?
He outlines these different modes of existence. Hedonism, which is just pure carnal satisfaction, but he says it's ultimately unfulfilling, leads to sickness. Then there's philosophy, the life of reason, creating your own manifesto. He sees its strengths, like pursuing knowledge, improving society.
But flaws, too.
Big flaws, in his view. Subjectivity is one, a kind of pompous tendency to exalt himself in the philosopher, and the risk of reason becoming its own rigid dogma, a crutch. And finally, religion, based on divine revelation, offers enlightenment, character, but faces the dilemma that if only one can be true, many are deceived. Plus dangers like self-contempt or spiritual elitism.
Interesting breakdown. He also talks about basic human needs, doesn't he?
Yes, a kind of hierarchy of needs. Food, obviously. Yeah. Intercourse, which he unpacks as not just physical, but also the need for emotional acceptance, love, and crucially, worship. A primal instinct, he believes. If it's not directed towards God, it gets transferred to other things, idolatry.
And how does suffering fit into this picture for JJ?
He connects it to concepts like self-righteousness and sorrow. Guilt, he argues, acts as an antidote to our self-righteous tendencies. Tragedy and sorrow forcefully remind us we're not fully in control, challenging our pride. He believes true revelation often comes through suffering.
What kind of suffering?
He mentions different types. Consequential suffering from our own actions, suffering inflicted by others, and even divine or natural suffering. He sees this shared experience of need and suffering as linking all humanity. And the complexity he sees in nature, like DNA, points him towards divine ordination, not chaos.
So for JJ, what constitutes victory in life? Where does his thesis ultimately land?
Well, he dismisses hedonism as leading to depredation. Philosophy, while admirable, he finds insufficient, like dampened gauze on the world's deep wounds. Religion holds promise but carries that risk of deception. His final conclusion: the only truly reasonable and rational worldview is a religious one.
And specifically Christianity.
Specifically Christianity, yes. Because for him, it points to a personal revealer, addressing both the intellectual and the relational worshipful needs he outlined. So after all that exploration, JJ lands firmly back on his specific faith commitment. V beyond the letters. Broader perspectives on faith and argument.
Now, this deep dive isn't just about JJ and Charles. The source material JJ compiled gives us glimpses into other related big discussions about faith.
That's right, which is fascinating because it shows these questions JJ and Charles are grappling with aren't unique to them. They echo through history.
Like the fictional correspondence JJ includes between Cornelius Van Til and C.S. Lewis, two major figures in Christian apologetics.
Exactly. Van Til, the champion of presuppositional apologetics, and Lewis, known more for his cumulative case approach.
And their debate centers on common ground.
Pretty much. Can you even have neutral ground for discussion with someone who doesn't share your foundational beliefs? Lewis thinks yes. You can start with shared reason and philosophy. Van Til argues no. Every fact is already interpreted through a belief system. God's reality is the necessary starting point, the presupposition for all knowledge. True neutrality is impossible for him.
So Van Til critiques Lewis for not starting explicitly with Scripture.
Essentially, yes. While Lewis defends his approach as necessary to reach ordinary people, the common folk, where they are, it's a classic debate within Christian thought about how to argue for faith.
Then there's that really imaginative piece, Paul Meets Muhammad.
Yeah, a fictional encounter set in 7th century Arabia. It's a bold way to dramatize the stark differences between Christianity and Islam at their roots.
What are the key points of contrast in that dialogue?
Well, Paul affirms the core Christian doctrines: Trinity, Christ's divinity, his death and resurrection for atonement. He grounds it in his own Damascus Road experience. Muhammad proclaims the absolute oneness of Allah, rejecting Jesus' divinity and crucifixion as heresy. He presents himself as the final prophet, citing his rebel hours on Mount Hira. Their foundational experiences and claims are just fundamentally different.
The source also touches on their scriptures, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Textual history.
It does. It presents the New Testament as having this vast manuscript tradition, calling it the most copied and reproduced manuscript in history. It contrasts this with the early history of the Quran, mentioning Kelly Futhman's standardization process, which involved destroying variant texts. The source suggests this has led to a great lack of critical scholarship, partly due to resistance within Islam.
And the tone gets pretty intense between them.
Oh, definitely. Muhammad, in the story, advocates using might and force against persecution, referencing military campaigns as divine validation. He's depicted holding a sword. Paul counters that the Christian struggle uses spiritual weapons, not carnal ones, aimed at pulling down strongholds of false ideas.
How does that encounter end?
Muhammad acknowledges Paul's historical impact, actually offers him a place in paradise if he'll convert, and predicts Islam's eventual global triumph. Paul, in response, weeps for Muhammad, seeing him as tragically mistaken about Christ, and declares his loyalty solely to the cross. It's a powerful, if fictionalized, juxtaposition. 6. The Last Sinner. A story of doubt, dogma, and deliverance.
Okay, to round out this incredible deep dive, there's one more piece from JJ's collection. Another fictional story, but wow, it's provocative. The Last Sinner.
It really is. Imagine this future, 2076. Christ's kingdom is supposedly established on Earth. Almost everyone is a Christian.
Except one guy.
Except one guy, Alexander Mancius, the last unbeliever.
That premise alone creates incredible pressure, doesn't it?
Immense. This coalition of Christian nations, the CCN, even passes Resolution 777. Basically, they put him under surveillance and decide to send in waves of the nation's top theologians, apologists, and evangelists for a forced spiritual debrief.
Why? What's the thinking?
The belief is that Christ won't return until everyone has converted. So Alexander is literally seen as the final holdout, the one person preventing the second coming.
Good grief. So he's subjected to endless preaching.
Hundreds of sermons, Bible studies. The source mentions everything from boisterous Baptists to meticulous Methodists. But Alexander finds it all just predictable, redundant, and rhetorical. He's not convinced. He even apparently wins an argument against a top presuppositionalist about reason.
He knows the arguments but doesn't feel it.
Exactly. He mocks charismatics who try the laying on of hands approach. He knows Christianity inside and out, maybe better than many believers, but it doesn't connect. And what's striking is his deepening isolation and just sheer frustration. He gets physically sick, emotionally drained.
Trapped by good intentions, maybe.
Perhaps. Trapped by constant preaching, but starved of genuine human connection. He observes that all these people claiming to speak for God are neglecting the one thing he needed the most.
What's his breaking point?
It happens in a hospital bed. He's been inundated with Christian TV, radio, even a nurse apparently curses him for his unbelief. He just snaps and screams, "I will gladly go to hell if I can get away from all you Christians."
Wow. Rock bottom.
Utter despair. But then, alone, weeping, he manages a simple prayer. God, show me Jesus. Show him to me and I'll believe.
And the breakthrough comes.
Yeah.
How?
Not through another argument, not another sermon. It comes through simple, unexpected, unconditional compassion. This little girl, Elizabeth, maybe 8 or 10 years old, just quietly comes and sits with him.
What did she say?
I just wanted to keep you company. I didn't want you to be alone. That's it. Her presence, her simple words, her touch. It breaks through all the intellectual barriers, all the emotional walls he's built up. Alexander starts weeping, and in that moment, he finally believes.
And
right at that moment, the story says, a distant trumpet sounds. The implication is clear. Outro.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a collection of material. From those intense debates between JJ and Charles to the historical clashes, right up to Alexander's final, very personal moment. This deep dive really covers a lot of ground about belief, doubt, and that human search for meaning.
It really does. What stands out across all these sources, the letters, the dialogues, the story, is that complex mix, isn't it? The interplay of reason, logic, but also emotion, personal experience, relationship. It all shapes how we see the world.
Yeah, it reminds us that while the intellectual arguments are definitely powerful and important,
sometimes the biggest shifts, the real breakthroughs, come from somewhere else entirely. Unexpected moments, simple acts of humanity.
Absolutely. That ongoing conversation between the friends, the deep arguments between thinkers like Van Til and Lewis, Paul and Muhammad's stark contrasts, and Alexander's eventual surrender, it all just highlights how deeply personal this search for truth really is for everyone.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. In your own journey, how do you find that balance between the intellectual pursuit of truth, the need for answers and reasons, and the equally real emotional, relational needs of the human heart?
That is definitely something powerful to chew on. We really hope this deep dive gave you a richer feel for these complex ideas and maybe sparked some new questions for you too. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.